Alright, we got us a quick little side project here to do. This is a 1968 Allis Chalmers B110, 10 horsepower Briggs, 42-inch mow deck. The real issue with it right now is the mow deck. All three spindles are shot, bearings are shot, so I want to make a little video on rebuilding these spindles and kind of fixing this deck up a little bit and a few other small things. I've had this thing for about 8 years. I've used it pretty much 6 of those years, so I've really put it to the test. So starting to show signs though. The bearings are roaring and the deck and everything, so it's about time for a rebuild. So that's what I'm going to get started on. If anyone clicked on this video thinking it might be for the moline or anything to do with the moline, I'm sorry to say I haven't really gotten around to doing anything to it. It's still pretty much like it was last video, so just had a few things going on around here. I haven't really had that much time to really focus on it. So, but I could do little side things like this because this is kind of important. Gotta keep the grass cut. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting this deck off. For any of you guys that are unaware of how these things come off, basically, if you look right there, there's a spring and then there's a lever right here. Basically, you just want to pop that spring and that lever down. That takes tension off your mule drive and makes this belt here loose. That's just your mule drive twist belt. This is your actual tensioning belt with your lever here. So you unclink that, get this twist belt off, and then basically there's 2 pins, one on this side, one on the other side, and then you've got your lifting chain right there. And I've just got mine held on with bolts, but I'm going to eventually put a pin in it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started removing all this stuff, and I'll see you guys when I'm done. And it's off. As you can hear, pretty loose, pretty shaky. The underside doesn't look terrible. I have redone this deck. Well, I say redone. I repainted it inside once, but I mean, it helped a little. But I used bed liner, and I found bed liner don't work too good. The best thing to use is just some simple oil-based paint. You're basically just trying to keep wherever the grass cakes up from rusting, because that's where your rust is going to really come in. So I'll probably just take everything off and pressure wash all that out, put some nice oil-based black paint in all this and seal it up. But yeah, I'm fixing to start taking this deck apart now. Get the shroud covers and everything off. A lot of this stuff's pretty loose, pretty wore out. Luckily I have a whole nother roller assembly over there I can take parts off of. So that's what I'm going to do. Swap parts, change stuff till I'm happy with it. But that's where we're at. Alright, I got the guards off. They're laying over here. You can see all the grease and stuff that's been building underneath there from those white bearings, but it doesn't look too bad. I was expecting that these would be loose, but they're not. The only one that's loose is this top one here. It's got a little bit of play in it, so I'll have to check out check out all the keys and put new keys and everything. Tighten everything up, put some new Allen's head screws, or set screws, in it. I'd say it's about time for a belt. That belt's about shot. No more adjustment left in the arm there, so yeah, it's time for a new belt. But we're in here, we're going to do it all. So I'm going to start taking all the cage and rollers and everything off. Get it down to just a bare shell. So I'll be back when I got that. Alright, so I got it all blowed apart now. There's the mess. But got it all took apart. Deck's still in pretty decent condition. The only issues that I could find, or that I remember about it, was this right here was rotted out, and then I hammered in a patch and welded it in 7 or so years ago, and it's still, I mean, still holding. So that's the only damage I can see that's actual rust. Everything else is still pretty decent. But it's pretty rough, but it ain't bad. It ain't eat up or anything. On this other side, I forgot that I had put primer on this the first time I redone it. I painted the inside yellow and then I primed this where it wouldn't rust. But I'm probably going to go back and paint all this black and just leave the outside, because it really ain't that bad, it's just dirty. But now I got to get started disassembling all those spindles and seeing how bad they are. When I got this deck, the spindles were stuck. They didn't have grease fittings in them. So I broke them all loose and drilled holes, put grease fittings in them, and then painted the underside of the deck and that top side, and then put it all back together. But that's pretty much all I ever did to it. Then I used it. But now them spindles are starting to show, because, you know, a stuck bearing with no grease ain't really gonna do too much. So I'm gonna get started cleaning those up, and I'll be back. Alright, I got the spindles on the bench. About to start taking the blades off and the pulleys and splitting them apart one by one. And I'm gonna lay all the pieces out in one of these things. So I'm gonna get started taking them apart, and I'll show or share anything that kind of strikes me as being bad or anything like that. I do have 2 more spindles of this style with the 6 bolts, and I got one 3-bolt. I bought a set of spindles off of eBay and rebuilt those for another project, and it had mixed match spindles. It had one 6-bolt, one 3-bolt design, and so I've got 2 extra housings and shabs and everything, and I could use the 3-bolt too if I had to. It's the same thing. But I'm gonna start taking these apart, and I'll show you what I got. Alright, so I got the first one apart. For anyone that is wondering how these things go, what's the proper stack, at least for mine, is we've got this big, the big thin one. It goes on first. Then we've got this other smaller thin one. He goes on after that, and then we've got one of these thicker ones. That gets you bottom blade spacing. Then up top, and this does vary, I've seen different ones of spindles I redone here recently. They were different. On this spindle it had 2 of these thick ones and 1 of these big thick washers. And of course you got your pulley, and then you got your nut, and you got another one of these that goes on before the nut on top of the pulley. So that's the stack for this. So you've got thin washers, you got a bearing, then you got this spacer that slides down over that other bearing, And before you put your bearing in, you got this spacer here that goes between the bearing and the thing. And yeah, bearing in that ring in the housing. It'd be at the top. That'd be the top bearing. It'll have that ring. And I haven't really figured out a way to get that out without bending this, but it's pretty easy. Just put it on like a anvil of a vise and tap it out. But here's the housing. A little bit of rust starting to form in there, as you can see. But it's not too bad. I gotta get these soaking in some diesel fuel, dissolve off all that grease and everything. So there's one. I got two more. And by the way, this was a pain to get apart. This shaft got rust in it because, like I said, these had never been greased. When I got this thing, never ever had they been greased. I had to put those grease fittings in them. So ever since I've used it, I've greased it, of course, but it never worked its way into the shaft between the two bearings because everything done rusted shut. So never got grease in here. The inside of this is pretty rusty, so a lot of beating, a lot of hammering. But always remember, try to use something soft when you're doing this, like a dead blow or a sacrificial piece of something, so you don't damage your threads. I use this nut right here. I set that nut on top with the nut on it to hold it in place, so I wouldn't damage anything. But I didn't hurt anything. I got it right out. So I done that to get it started, and then I switched over to a punch and drove it on through. It'd be useful. It'd be real good if you had a press. You wouldn't really have to do all this rigging stuff, but I don't have a press, so you do it with what you got. So, but I'm gonna stop blabbering and get on with another one. Alright, I got them all took apart. I did find a few things that aren't really too good with some of these spindles. Like that one right there, it spun on the bearing race, or on the bearing. It cut a pretty good groove in it, so this spindle here is junk, this shaft. Then the main center one, same way, except it's not as bad, but you can see it right there. It wore pretty good groove in it too. Luckily though, I have another set of spindles, or another spindle for both of these that's in good shape, so I'll just knock the shafts out of them. We'll have to make it work, but other than that, everything come apart pretty good. I do have one good one, so one is better than none, I suppose. Pulleys are in pretty good shape. I do have one that's a little wore, but it ain't bad. I forget which one it is. I think it's that one. But I'm going to take apart those other ones, and I'm going to get these housings soaking in some diesel fuel and get all those pieces and these gooped up pulleys, get all that stuff soaking too, and probably whatever spindles that I end up using. So I'm going to get started doing that. Alright, so I went ahead and took those other spindles apart. They were a little bit better, but they were still pretty bad, but they'll work. This one's still got that groove ore in it, but it's a lot shallower, so I don't see nothing wrong with it. And then the other one, it's a little bit better too. It still got a little bit of a groove, but it ain't too bad. So those will work just fine. Now I just got to get all this stuff cleaned up. We can get the new bearings put in it. Alright, I got it all soaking now. This is diesel fuel and kerosene mix. pretty much it's furnace fuel oil. We got a lot of people around here in our neighborhood, they switched over to electric, so they give us their old furnace fuel, so it works really good for this. But it's basically dyed diesel fuel. And I just put a little kerosene in it to make it eat more. But there it is, it's soaking. I'm gonna let this stuff soak overnight. Then I'll come back out here tomorrow and scrub it. While that stuff's soaking, I'm gonna get started on this old deck shell. As you can see, I've pressure washed it, got all the old grass clumps and stuff out. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and, with a grinder and just take this to bare metal, and I'm gonna get some 1/4-20 nuts. I'm gonna weld on these spots. That way I can put the guards on with the screws, and it'll be better. And when I get that done, I'm gonna paint all this gloss black. And when I do that, we'll be ready to go. Alright, so I got all my spots ground down now. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a real short 1/4-20 bolt, and I'm going to use these flanged nuts. Gives me a little bit more surface to weld to. Basically I'm going to run the bolt to the other side, put it on there, give it a couple tack welds, and it'll be good to go. One thing to note, if you're going to do this, go ahead and open these holes up a little bit, because these holes are originally threaded, and a couple of mine still are. So if you put the nut on there and then run the bolt, you're basically going to be like jamming two nuts together. So it's going to be real hard to get that bolt back out, and it's not going to be a good day. So to simplify that, just make sure you open those holes up to where these 1/4-20s will just slip right through. Alright, I got my nuts welded on, and I also hit this a lick, so I'll flip it over now and show you the underside. Here's the underside. See, I just did like 3 little tacks, just enough to hold it. Now I'm going to clean this up a little bit, get some of this scale off here, and put some gloss black on it. Alright, I got the spindles cleaned up, degreased, everything. So now what I'm going to do is chuck them in the sandblaster, sandblast them off, and put some Pour 15 on them. And the main reason why I'm doing that is you can see inside that cup right there, all that rust that's around that ring. These will eventually rust through. So you'll be cutting your grass, you might hit like a tree root or something a little stiff, and this whole ring right here will just twist off. So then your spindle's going to be flopping around. This will still be bolted to the deck, but the whole bearing and everything will be loose. So to prevent that from happening, I'm going to chip all that rust out of there, sandblast it out, and Pour 15 them. Alright, I got them all blasted, so I'm going to hurry up, get some Pour 15 slapped on them, and I'll be back out here tomorrow to finish them. Alright, so I'm getting ready to put these new bearings in. See, I've got my housings all Pour 15'd, got all that rust out of there, everything. But before I do, I'm going to have to take that Pour 15 off that I got in there. But this would be a good idea anyway, even if you were not Pour 15 in them, or not getting paint on them in here, to just go on ahead and run some sandpaper over this top lip, because the bearing doesn't set flush. He goes on down in there a little deeper. So the bearing will be below this edge, and there's always going to be a rust ring where that bearing's set, top and bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and run a little sandpaper around, get that Pour 15 knocked down, get any of the rust that I left want to sandblast it off, and then start knocking bearings in. Alright, when you're getting ready to put your new bearing in, I probably would suggest maybe putting a little bit of oil in here just to help drive it in a little bit. And another thing to note, these have a spacer washer. It's this guy right here, and he goes in there below the bearing like that. And these get nicked up pretty bad because when you're knocking the new bearings out, you'll hit this instead of the edge of the bearing like you're aiming for. So you'll end up bending the you-know-what out of it. But I just usually use the anvil on the vise and straighten it out the best I can. But I do try to avoid hitting that, but you can't always get it. So you got to make sure you put that in there. Oil your bearing up. Drive it in there. I always use like a socket. If you had a press, that'd be the most ideal way to do this, but I don't have one. So, socket and a hammer is going to have to do for me. Flip it over after you do that. And you can do top or bottom, it don't really matter. Same way, oil your bearing, and do not forget your crush sleeve. He'll go in there like that. And you'll have to try to line this up with your bearing openings. So, I'm going to start putting these bearings in. Alright, so I'm going to show you guys how these spindle shims go back. So here's the spindle. This is just going to be for demonstrations. So the first thing you're going to put on is one of these. Now these are a little different sometimes. They can be a little thicker, a little thinner. It don't really matter. The main bearing crush happens in your spindle housing anyway. With this guy, this is just adjusting all of this stuff. So you're gonna start off. So you should have 6 of these guys right here. You should have 3 of these, 3 of these, and 3 of these. So start off the stack. Put this guy on first. That's your small, thick one. Then you're going to put your big, thin one. And then you're going to put your small, thin one. That allows the bearing to have clearance between for the dust shield. Because that's what this is. This is like a dust shield. So when you're cutting grass, you know, something don't get wedged in there and mess everything up. Just keeps it real close to the face of that bearing so nothing gets messed up. Then once you get this slid into your housing with your bearings and all that, the next thing you're going to put on before you put your pulley on, one of these, and then your thick one. Again, that's just a dust shield. Then your pulley can go on, set screws and all that stuff. So I hope that was helpful for someone who is maybe in the middle of tearing one of these apart and they don't have everything or they've forgotten. So hope that was helpful. Alright, I got one of them together. Spins real good. Now I gotta put the new key in. It's always a good idea when you do these, if they've run loose in the past, just to go ahead and pop you a new key, because otherwise you're going to have some issues. Alright, 1 down, 2 more to go. Alright, got the spindles all done. Got them painted, new grease fittings, so it's time to start putting this deck back together. Alright, got the spindles put back in. So I'm going to start putting the rollers and the hanging hardware and all that stuff back. Alright, I got my spindles put back in. Got my belt on, got my idler spring and everything. So now I'm going to move on to the carriage pieces. So I'm going to lay them out up here and see what I've got. Alright, I went through and got all the pieces I'm going to use. All that. Here's all the discarded, more than I'm willing to go with. I am going to use this piece though, because that one right there, one of them bolts, got a little bit of a bend in it, so I found that them things will snap off real easy, so I'm not even going to mess with it. This one's nice and straight, so I'm going to go with it, but I'm going to go ahead and get started putting these pieces on, and we'll have a finished deck here in a little bit. Alright, here's what we got so far. I went on ahead and put the shrouds on, and I've got the two front deals. I've got the two adjustment pieces put on, and I was going to do a rebuild on this roller set, but they're pretty wore, they're rounded, and the ones I've got over there ain't much better, so I've decided to just let it go and run it. And the actual rod that runs on here is pretty wore out as well, so I think what I'm going to do is just wait, get one of these new, and buy the rollers and just replace this whole thing. But for now, it'll be fine. So I'm just gonna run with it. But I'm gonna get back to putting some more pieces on, and I'll be back when I got more. Alright, well, I'm losing my light, but I got it all put back together. Got the spindles all greased, and before anyone says anything, I do have sealed bearings, but a sealed bearing is not actually a sealed bearing. It's just got a little oil seal, and you put enough grease in a housing like this, it's going to push past that seal, still get in the bearing, and it'll lubricate it. So, but I got the blades on, they're sharp, got all new bolts. And if anyone's wondering how you tighten the blades up, use a block of wood. You just get them started. You just want to put it like that. That keeps it. Tighten your nuts up. Move to the next one. So that's how you do that. But tomorrow I'm going to put this deck back under the tractor and see how it does. Alright, I got it back under it. But before I do anything else, I've got to work on this pulley right here. As you can see, get this belt out of the way. Over time it's wore that edge off, so I've got a new one of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and, while I'm doing it, go ahead and pull the wheel off and get this off out of the way and fix this. Alright, there it is. Got the new pulley on, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the wheel put back on and get all the belts hooked up. We're gonna see what this thing will do. Alright, well, here it is, all back together. I'm fixing to start cutting this grass out here, so I'm gonna get to it. That's gonna wrap it up for this video. See you guys in the next one.